Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today's video is about Draven. And it's about Draven because Draven exists in a kind of interesting space, and I've seen some of you comment, particularly, with the hotfix balance patch. Some people were questioning, well, why wasn't Draven also a part of that hotfix balance patch? And some of you might be thinking, well, why would he be? He's not as problematic as, say, some of those Shreeman cards, like Merciless Hunter. So why should Draven be nerfed? And it's a really interesting, little discussion, I think. And it reminds me very much of another situation that happened in this game not too long ago. But let's talk about Draven today, and, should Draven be nerfed, or why wasn't he, nerfed, and why might the devs keep Draven away from the nerfs, whereas, they might nerf other cards that have sort of, similar win rates and similar inclusion rates in certain metas. And to me, there's two main reasons why Draven does not get nerfed. And the first one, we need to go back in time and go on a little story about why Draven is similar to Twisted Fate. Now, for those of you who might not have been there, or, for those of you who can't quite remember, Twisted Fate and Draven have a kind of similar history. Because Twisted Fate maybe is the more extreme version of Draven. And by what I mean is that essentially Twisted Fate pretty much dominated the meta of this game from, I want to say, about November last year to probably around April or May, whenever that nerf to Twisted Fate came. And I don't just mean like Twisted Fate was a good card, I mean that Twisted Fate was pretty much in the top deck the entire time. Now, it wasn't the same deck. It was spread across a bunch of different decks, but Twisted Fate was always there. Twisted Fate was always at the top. And you might think, well, how the hell did they let that happen? Surely after the second one, you would have gone, well, Twisted Fate needs to be changed. But no, because what there was a bunch of people who were standing up for Twisted Fate and saying, no, Twisted Fate isn't the problem, it's always something else. And there was three pretty standout decks that Twisted Fate was included in throughout that time. Of course, it started with Go Hard Twisted Fate. It started off with Go Hard Twisted Fate, then it moved to Aphelios Twisted Fate after Go Hard got nerfed, then Aphelios got nerfed, and then it moved to Fizz Twisted Fate. And, these just weren't good decks. These were, some of the best decks we've ever seen in the game. All of these decks. And, it was kind of weird. It took until that sort of third deck, and even then there was still some people saying, no, Twisted Fate isn't the problem, X, Y, and Z is the problem in these other decks. It took a long time for them eventually to nerf Twisted Fate into a spot now where I think, he's good. And, he's a good champion and isn't a problem anymore, but maybe will be again one day because of how he levels up. But that's another story for another time. And Twisted Fate reminds me of Draven, because Draven has kind of existed in the same way, where Draven, whether it's Ezreal Draven, whether it's Discard Aggro, whether it's now like Scion Draven, right? There's always been, for a long time, probably going back to like the Aphelios days, really, with Twisted Fate, all the way back then, which is probably like at least 6 months now, there's been a Draven deck that has been a top tier deck. Now, maybe it's not exactly the same as Twisted Fate, because it's not necessarily the top deck in the game, but it is definitely a tier 1 deck, and Draven has always existed in those tier 1 decks. And similar to Twisted Fate, there are the people who will stand up and defend Draven. And why do they do this? Well, again, similar to Twisted Fate, they enjoy playing him. He's a fun champion to play. He doesn't seem to give like anything too crazy that's like completely different from other champions. It doesn't seem that insane of what Draven actually does and gives for you, similar to Twisted Fate. I think a lot of perhaps newer players or less experienced players, look at Twisted Fate and think it's still a 4-mana 2/2, it can only be so bad. And I think that, people will probably look at Draven, it's only a 3-mana 3/3 with quick attack. I mean, plenty of other champions have that. We just got Caitlyn come into the game who has that exact same stat line. It can only be so bad. Of course, that isn't quite how it works, and there is a lot of nuance and minute detail that really matters a lot into the power level of these cards. And essentially, Draven, is so strong because he gives you a free spinning axe on summon, and combined with the quick attack and the fact that you are then holding that axe pretty much means that nothing can block Draven on turn 3, and so you're pretty much guaranteed the second X. And then as soon as you've got 2 X's, then it's like, you know, now all of a sudden you need something with 6 health to be able to block Draven. And then, you know, that keeps compounding and compounding until you've just got so much value from one card, because then you discard the spinning X's to get more value from them. You never even have to use them. Draven just has given you so much value that, you know, it doesn't matter. And Draven rarely levels up in these decks, and that's always a good sign that, you know, the card is nuts. The card doesn't even have to level up. It's just the first side of the card is so good, it does not matter, right? And so the champion, I think, has that sort of disguised, I'm just like every other champion, right? I'm just like everything else. Don't mind me. He kind of has that disguise in him. At the same time, like, you know, he's actually insane, though. Similar to Twisted Fate. And so I think that that is why Draven has kind of gone under the radar. You know, we've seen some other nerfs to, you know, these decks that Draven has been in. Like Tri-Beam, for instance, is a good one. You know, where it's not Draven's fault. Draven's not the problem. Something else must be the problem, not Draven. And of course, there is a reluctance on Riot's part as well to just nerf champions in general, right? We've seen in the recent hotfix balance patch that Sivir wasn't nerfed, even though, you know, could they very easily just have reverted Sivir's level up to what it was? Yes. But they didn't. They refused to change Sivir. So there is a sense as well that, you know, they don't want to go out and change these champions. And that's kind of the other point, that Draven is going to be sort of the last thing to be nerfed, because I think that, you know, they want the champions to be the strongest cards in the game, of course. That kind of the whole point of the game, I think. They want the champions to be good, so don't nerf the champions, nerf the other things around them instead. And that has kind of combined to where Draven is going to consistently be at the top of the table. And honestly, it could be for a lot longer, because what happened with Twisted Fate, the difference with Twisted Fate is, as I said, he was in tier 0 decks. Like, TF Fizz is one of the best decks the game's ever seen. And not only is it one of the best decks the game's ever seen, but it pushed Twisted Fate in particular to the limit. You know, Twisted Fate was leveling up a turn after he was being played, which was something that they never intended for. But that was happening. And so because that kind of pushed Twisted Fate to the edge, I think that that forced the devs' hands in saying, we have to nerf Twisted Fate. But Draven hasn't really been pushed in the same way. There isn't sort of an all-in Draven deck that's very good. Draven is just sort of quietly existing, generating you so much value, and consistently will do, because that's how Draven goes. And I think the problem with Draven, in comparison to perhaps the other champions in the game, is Draven is the most self-contained champion. Draven will exist no matter what. You can nerf every other card in Noxus, but Draven would still be a fine choice for any deck, because he's completely self-contained. It's only him and the spinning X's that you need. So as long as you have any synergy with discard or targeting your own units, of which there is plenty in the game, you're going to be fine. Draven will be a very good card to play. And so it honestly doesn't matter. We've seen Draven thrive before Sion came out. And Sion just came and gave him a bunch of extra tools as well. So I don't expect Draven to be nerfed anytime soon. Because I don't think that anyone needs to make a deck that pushes Draven to the limits. Why would they? When you just have this quiet killer sitting in the background that will continue to dominate this game for a very, very long time, potentially. And so we'll see if one day things do change. Personally, I would like to see Draven not create the spinning X when summoned. Because then, you know, if you do play a 3-mana 3/4, then they can block Draven, which would be, you know, a change. Draven might actually have something that can counter him, which he currently doesn't. So that was just a little rant video for you about Draven. I do think Draven should be nerfed, but I don't expect him to be nerfed anytime soon. So with that in mind, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, you know, Draven, and should Draven be nerfed? And, you know, if not, then maybe there's some other ideas that I hadn't thought of why Draven should be nerfed, or, you know, could be changed. So I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. And tomorrow we'll be returning to normal gameplay videos. It's just that, as you might be able to hear, I am a bit ill, so, you know, I don't really have the energy or will to, you know, go and create a big gameplay video. Instead, I'll just sit here quiet. But we do have a spicy deck coming up for you tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. I think you will very much enjoy it. So Have a nice day, everyone, and I will see you next time.